We're back. We're a little later than normal. We had some difficulties with getting on here with Borg. He was ready to go. I was not. That's my fault. But we are live on Sunday with a recap, which will be fun. Probably worked out the best for both of us.
Just for the record, what happens on homecoming stays on homecoming. So
that's exactly it.
No matter what school you are, that applies. So no need for apologies or explanations, guys. Welcome to the Jackrabbit Illustrated, Jackrabbit and FCS postgame show. A very late postgame show, about 12 hours later than normal, but it's all good. We're all good. And boy, that was a great week of football. Of college football for a lot of reasons. It certainly, I think it delivered on what we were kind of expecting when we signed off a week ago, what we were kind of hoping for on all fronts. And I think we've got a lot more clarity now on where this league is heading.
Right.
I know we still have another week to go for a certain game down south, but I think we kind of have a pretty clear idea on where things are heading and where even the postseason picture is starting to look trend to.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many wild things that happen this weekend. I don't know if wild, but
I guess I should maybe say we know where the postseason picture is looking for South Dakota State and South Dakota. I don't know about the rest of the FCS. It's a bit of a cluster outside of this. The Rushmore State's pretty set, I think. But everybody else, I have no clue anymore.
Right. Yeah. I watched the end of the Idaho game, and apparently I wasn't the only one because there's a fair amount of people who were responding to my tweets, you animals. So we were watching that, and boy, that was an interesting game, interesting result. I was surprised by Montana winning. Montana looked good. They looked a lot better than they have in the other games I've watched them this year. Montana fans are going to be unbearable because of it. So thanks, Idaho.
They earned it. I mean, they definitely did. I think I had some people, and I was obviously I had some people asking about that. I was a little split between my alma mater playing last night at the same time and that game, and it was honestly kind of the same thing because they were both kind of relying on onside kicks. I do credit for Montana for playing well. I think Idaho did look a little – you could kind of tell which team has been in that moment and been maybe in the bigger national TV games a little more. Idaho just looked just didn't look like they were quite ready for the moment right away. They did turn it on late, but obviously they got down 16, and then you're needing 2-point conversions and onside kicks, and boy, Giovanni McCoy, he is incredible. I mean, that guy is plastic, man. And I know they lost, and I still would confidently pick SDSU if they face each other. I still wouldn't want to face them, though. That guy, he is insane, and Hayden Hatton is a great receiver. I mean, it wasn't just Montana being, getting beaten. I mean, those two are a great combo. But yeah, I do think Idaho was probably a little overamped, nervous, whatever you want to call it, for being on Nash. I mean, how often have the Vandals been in that position in the last ever?
Right. Well, and watch the what I did watch. There's a couple interceptions by McCoy in the second half, and it felt like he was just trying to do too much. He was trying to superhero it at that time, and it was too early to be trying to do that. And then and that really got him in trouble. So I think if you really want to beat Idaho, you got to do what the Grizz did and make McCoy start to press a little bit to try to do more than he has to. I think the biggest game, though, has to do with this comment with Gavin saying, "I'm a little late, but UND crushed NDSU."
Yeah.
That was I didn't expect it to go that way, but I'm not surprised UND won. I'm surprised how much they won by, though.
Yeah, I think I had UND winning. I thought they were due. They almost won in Grand Forks 2 years ago, and that was a season that NDSU won the national title, obviously the fall season 2021. But to say, I said this on Twitter earlier, and it got some interesting comments. And of course, I got some of the idiot Bison fan, the less cultured portion of the NDSU fan base, to put it kindly, responding on that. That this was a loss that losing to UND was going to be something that would shake that fan base and the whole apparatus to the core in a way that nothing else does. Because again, football is the king fish up there in a way that hockey is for UND, and they've built it in a way that they just never. They had built in a way that UND would never be able to match it. They in the D2 era, it would be like if NDSU starts a hockey program and within a couple of years goes up to Ralph Engelstad Arena and beat them 7-1. Right. That would be, we wouldn't imagine that. And now, it kind of it used to be that way in the D2 era. I mean, Bison fans were starting to lose their mind in that era when they had like a 15-year winning streak, I think, when they were winning national titles in the D2 era. And eventually UND turned it around under Roger Thomas and started winning even won a national title toward the end of the Bison's D2 run. But you thought as they built this dynasty and they even kind of surpassed UND hockey in terms of popularity, you never really thought that UND was going to get to the point where they would beat them. And this wasn't, we hit a last-minute Hail Mary or we hit a late touchdown. It was that was a domination. And there wasn't – you watch the game, it wasn't trick plays. It wasn't, hitting long. I mean, they were basically, as I just read some columns, they were just running up the middle, run up the middle, run up the middle. They didn't significantly outgain them, I don't think. It was just a total boat race. And it started from the beginning when they took a kickoff back 102 yards. I mean, It just was a flat domination. And, even – I know Mike McFeely gets some heat every now and then, but he said in his column today that not only did they bury NDSU in that game, they buried the dynasty. And I'm still not to the point where I would say that kill them for the rest of the year, because I still have that fear in my mind, and I still think the rest of the FCS is still kind of watered down. I still believe that, but. Yeah, if you're still looking at NDSU in the gaze of what they were, you're not looking at what they are, and they're just not. Right. They're not that good of a football team right now. And the rest of the Dakota schools, UND, USD, and especially SDSU, which we've known now for a while, they're better right now. They're better, yeah. And to think otherwise is just ignoring what you're seeing with your own eyes.
Well, that was the thing. I had a little bit of an argument with the UND podcast with Shannon Schweigert and stuff on Twitter. If some people saw that, they were all mad at me. It's fine. But they go, well, the annoying part about these weekend games is that for whatever reason, the fans of the U's want to make it about, well, our rivalry is a bigger rivalry, and that's fine, whatever. My counter argument, because obviously, like you said, it shakes them to their core losing this game. And like you said, it's because football is so big at NDSU and it's not UND sport. I would also argue part of it is for NDSU to lose to UND compared to losing to SDSU is a whole different level of program you're losing to. I mean, it wouldn't be as much because it is a rivalry, but they'd still be this shook if they went down to this happened at Illinois State. You lose after losing to USD. It wouldn't have the same impact, but it would be extremely alarming for that program. That it obviously hurts more because it's a rival and everything like that. I think part of the hurt being more than losing to an SDSU is just where the programs are at. You're not losing to a semifinal team. You're not going 10-1 and winning a national title when you've lost to UND like that. You are now to the point where you have serious problems. You might not make the playoffs. I mean, I wouldn't bet on that. If somebody thinks they're not going to make the playoffs, I think that you're getting a little too excited there. But they're not getting a seed unless they pull one out on SDSU in the marker game. So that really signals a different era coming into NDSU, because one thing NDSU has not done that SDSU's done more of than NDSU's done in the FCS is win road playoff games. SDSU has a better record on road playoff games than NDSU does. I don't know if they have a road playoff win.
They did win their last road playoff wins were 2010, and that was kind of I say their dynasty started in 2010. I know that technically they didn't win the title that year, but that was the first year they made the playoffs. They won a home playoff game on that Thanksgiving weekend, but they actually went to Montana State that year, who'd won the Big Sky, dominated them in a road playoff game. Then they went to Eastern Washington, and there was kind of a controversial finish in that game where it looked like Eastern Washington didn't get into the end zone on a touchdown play, and Eastern Washington won, ended up winning the national title. That kind of drove – to this day, NDSU people thought they should have won that game and gone on to win their first national title.
They've never let that go.
Oh, yeah, no. It's still, like, to their mind, that should have been they should have 10 national titles. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where, to me, the dynasty really started, though, because that was the year Brock Jensen started playing. But yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, I agree with you to an extent, but there's so much history, and we kind of touched on it last week between UND and NDSU that it also, I mean, and this is, I'm not trying to knock USD and SDSU, but the two programs in South Dakota weren't at the same levels that NDSU and UND were in the Division II. I mean, those Indy and I mean, they won national titles in the Division II era. USD had a moment in the 80s. I mean, USD obviously played for national title, lost to NDSU in a national championship, I think in 86. Should have probably gone to a national title game one other year, and they lost to the Bison in a semifinal in the Dakota Dome. I think that was another year they probably should have won it, and then they kind of got upset, and the Bison won a title. So there was more of a heated rivalry. I think there was also some stuff. The hangovers. Yeah, there's. I will say I didn't drink anything, so I'll leave that to Brendan and the Jackrabbit fans there. But no, I mean, and there's also some other stuff too. We also forget that nickname that drove some things too. I know there was they used to play for the Nickel Trophy, which was pretty cool. It was just a different and this. I mean, again, the hockey program there, I think people don't understand too. That was such a national thing for UND that it was the premier program in North Dakota. Like, I think that was what was nationally known. I think NDSU people will never admit it, but there had to be some jealousy over that was what North Dakota, when people thought of sports in North Dakota, it was probably, oh, you got the Fighting Sioux hockey team. Well, it's like, and I'm sorry, but no matter what Bison football did, D2 football did not register that much. You can win 800 Division II national titles, not going to register that much. But when they went Division I and they had this unbelievable run of success with the nine titles, you're getting on College Game Day, you're beating all these FBS teams. It did legitimately supplant North Dakota hockey as the most popular ticket. And that was part of their aim when they went up Division I. I heard some of those discussions. They wanted that to be the big ticket in North Dakota, and it became that. I mean, it legitimately, I think it still is. And it's not to say that North Dakota hockey doesn't get any less attendance. They still sell that barn out, and it's still a big event. But it became the big ticket thing in North Dakota. And to come back and see it, like you said, it would be a concern if they lost to Illinois State. It'll be a concern if they go lose to Western Illinois next week, obviously. But which won't
no way that's happening.
No way. Or Murray State the following week. That's a nice thing for them. They get two gimmies, you would think, the next few weeks. But when you add in those histories and the fact that now they had built this thing that they thought they just built in their head that they never were going to lose this. This is their thing. I mean, this shakes you to the core, and they already had problems. And of course, you're also thinking you're maybe on this train where you're on your way up to the FBS, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, they've needed the humble pie for a little while. I think they probably need it within the program too, not just the fan base, fans, media, all that. We're a different level. The program probably needed that too. I think I even heard some of the players admit it. The interesting thing was some of the comments I heard coming from the players. I remember that Jake Kava, he was a lineman. He was very candid after the USD game. He was the one who came out and basically admitted, hey, USD kicked our the other word for butt. He said, well, basically a couple of them said, we'll find out who's in or out in this coming week. When you're hearing that from a team, when they're saying, hey, we'll find out who's in or out, that tells you there's some problems in that locker room right now. And so there's a bit, they've obviously had the transfer portal stuff in that locker room the last few years. It's bigger than just what we're seeing on the field right now. They've got some things going on there. So it's not just what we're seeing on the field. I think the dynasty run is over. It's not to say they couldn't go out and still win some playoff games and maybe even stumble around, just because, like I said, I don't think the FCS is that strong. But it's going to take a lot, and they've got a lot to work through. But you never know. Like I said, it would be a big upset right now if they came up here and won. I say in Brookings in a few weeks, and I don't know if 7-4, if they lose to anyone other than SDSU, which would be Southern Illinois, or if they go to Northern Iowa, I don't know if 7-4 is getting them in, because who's their impressive win right now? I mean, Eastern Washington last night lost to Idaho State. That was a ranked win for them at the time. That win's not looking good anymore. I don't know about Central Arkansas getting you in.
They'll get in at 7-4.
We've seen on name recognition, maybe they get in. But if they're 7-4 and their best win is Northern Iowa and Central Arkansas, that's really, by the numbers, that's a team that probably should not be in. If they're 6-5, they're definitely not getting in. I don't care if their name is North Dakota State. If they're 6-5, they're not getting in. 7-4, but either way, you're right. Unless they beat NDSU and run the table, they're playing on Thanksgiving regardless.
Yeah,
and Central Arkansas. Yeah, I need to look up Central Arkansas.
I think they'll be playing on Thanksgiving. I don't think, even if they did have a weak resume because they don't have any good wins, we saw with Montana, just because of the gate they bring, they'll get in. I mean, the committee came out last year with Montana and said we considered their bid before we picked the field, which shook the whole faith in the whole across the country in this playoff.
I think that happened a few years ago with Weber State in North Dakota too, where
same year. Yeah. So they brought Montana in and said, yeah, we knew they were going to be a big gate, and that was taken into consideration. And then UND had bid $120,000 to host the game, and Weber had bid like $50,000, and they gave it to Weber because, well, we thought Weber was the better program. So there's some screwy stuff going on with the committee right now. That's a whole. We can go on that for hours and hours and hours.
Oh, yeah.
But.
I
think they get in.
I'm seeing the 7-4 comments. I mean, yeah, I think they're in at 7-4 probably. My point just is, if they don't beat SIU, I don't think they've got. If they don't beat SIU and SDSU and they're 7-4, I don't think that's a great. I think if they're anyone but North Dakota State, I don't know if that gets you in, because it's just if you don't have, you lose to all three Dakota schools and SIU, who have been at times top 10 teams throughout the year. That's not a great resume. The only thing you've got is your North Dakota State, and let's be honest too, with the attendance thing, how many people in Fargo are really going to want to show up for a playoff game right now with this team? I think that dome. I'm not sure that dome's even half full right now at this pace. I mean, they weren't really showing. I mean, they were having attendance. I say issues. I think they still got 15,000 last year, but I'm not really sure there's going to be that big of a crowd if they're playing on Thanksgiving with this team and the things that are going on. You never know. They could be playing another Dakota school. I mean, who knows? They could be playing UND for all we know. But
well, hey, you know what? They've been saying for years that they're tired of the FCS because it's boring. Well, it's not boring now, so they should be showing up.
Your wish. Yeah, it wasn't competitive. Well, you suddenly get not only are you now getting close games, you're getting your tail handed to you. So.
Right.
But I mean, and I've always said this, and of course we had that news, I think last week, that the fee now to go to FBS is what, $5 million. I don't necessarily think that's a huge impediment. I think if somebody really wants to go, they'll find a way to, if you have enough resources, you'll still find the way. But it's like, I've said this, I'm like, unless you're getting that invite to the Big Ten, the SEC, or the Big 12, it's really not all that worth it. And
Yeah.
It's like I think we've started to see more and more that you should really be thankful for what you got, and especially when you won 9 out of 11 championships. I mean, come on. There's not, there comes a point where you realize you got to realize you're not going to get to date. It's like, yeah, I would have loved to married a supermodel when I was growing up, but it does come a point where you realize, yeah, there's only so long I can swing outside my weight class, so to speak.
Well, my thing is with that theory of we're tired of this level and these people and it's boring and everything like that. For me, the big thing is eventually that will happen at the next level as well. You think if you go into the MAC, you're going to all of a sudden stay excited about Western Michigan and Eastern Michigan coming to Fargo? No, eventually you're going to get bored and you're going to be looking at the next thing or whatever, where, oh, well, it'd be how cool it'd be to have these people. Can we be? No, that's not it. You got to be, you're excited or you're not about the football program. That is what it is. The rest of it's just short-term gains.
It's a sugar rush. It's a sugar rush. It's a temporary high. I mean, those things would fill for a minute, and some of this is also the drive of, oh, let's get, Mountain West, like, oh, let's go to Las Vegas for a game. Let's see. Some of the road trips would be fun. I'm not lying there. But yeah, the novelty wears off, and the novelty where the novelty would wear off really quick is when you're winning conference championships, and then all of a sudden you win a third conference championship in 5 or 6 years or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going back to the same crappy bowl game for the, we're getting nothing for this. Yeah. We're going to the Boca Raton Bowl for the third time in 5. I mean, I'll say this is the story I use, and it's not even this good now, but when I was at CSU, believe it or not, we had good teams back in the day. People don't really believe this. We were actually ranked at one point 12th in FBS because we were that good once.
Right.
It's like the Stone Ages of 2002. I mean, they had great teams back then. I mean, they were one of the forerunners to Boise and some of the best ones. The best we could ever really hope for was the Cotton Bowl. And this wasn't the Cotton Bowl of the BCS. This was, just, hey, you could go to the Cotton Bowl. We were constantly going to the Liberty Bowl at that point. And again, this was not a Liberty Bowl in the BCS. This was, you're playing Conference USA's champion. They were getting bored with it outright. Now, would I kill for that now? Yeah. And, at best you could go to the Holiday Bowl when we were in the WAC. Again, these things aren't even available now if you're in those conferences. These tie-ins are gone. They've been bought off by the bigger conferences. So, this idea that, hey, well, you could get into the conference, you could get into the playoff because it's expanding. All right, look, if you really think the smaller conferences are going to keep getting seats at the table, I got swampland in Florida I can sell you, because those bigger conferences are going to break off, or they're going to do something eventually to keep that for themselves. They're not going to let everybody in on this thing. There's too much money, and they don't want to be letting these smaller conferences in on the pie. I'm just telling you, it's not going to be. I do not expect them. The moment they blow out some Mountain West school or some Sunbelt team that they get let in, they're going to start trying to peel that back. So, yeah, I think I've said this for a long time. Eventually, we're going to see what's left of the group of 5 or outside of the power conferences. It's all going to get broken away from. It'll basically become its own FCS level at some point. I wouldn't be shocked if that's when you see the SDSUs and NDSUs, Dakota schools, and what's left move into that level and maybe form another FCS. But it's just not worth it. I'm telling people right now, it would be fun for a minute, but within a couple of years, you're right back to where you started. And then you probably killed the rest of your sports because you put them in a conference where they're having to fly all over. You've killed your budgets. You've killed your rivalries. Is that really worth it for maybe a little more TV exposure and TV money? Maybe. And to be right back where you were and just playing for nothing. I just don't, just let's see where the landscape is in a few years. Be ready, and then take advantage of it when you can. Yeah, would you rather be Kennesaw State right now or Sam Houston? Right. No, I guess if you want to be on, if you're that desperate, if you really want to be on Tuesday Night Football, is that? I see these half-empty. It's just stupid. It's prostituting yourself for TV money to get on. And it's not even good TV money in Conference USA, as we discussed. But I guess the funny thing is we've been sitting here, we've been talking more about NDSU and Montana, and we have not even gotten to the South Dakota State and South Dakota, who, by the way, had pretty good wins. So let's get to the Jacks, who by the way, who had that we've had so much to fear about Northern Iowa in Hobo Day, and that did not really happen yesterday, and it became clear right away from about the first drive that this was not going to be one of those Hobo days where Northern Iowa put up much of a fight.
Yeah, this was. I don't know. Were you there, Zach? I don't remember. I might.
Yeah, I was. I did. I did come up for that. I got there right at kickoff. I shot one of the state soccer games. I think I'll be at most of the games from here on out now. Honestly, I'll certainly be down there in Vermillion in 2 weeks, and then up for the marker game as well. So I was, and I mean, this was aside from you and I getting the first down on their opening series. This was pretty well a domination from. I do have to give the Panthers some credit. I thought they kind of hung it. I thought after they got that, I think it was the second turnover, when it looked like they were going to make it 21-0 right away, that, okay, this is going to get really bad. I will give you and I some credit. They kind of hung in there when they were kind of trading turnovers there in the second quarter, but it never really felt like this was in doubt.
Yeah, it never felt like it was in doubt at all. Shout out to our guy Ron Lowney for putting it out there. You know, he almost nailed the prediction. You know, he said 38-3, 41-6, not that far off. Well done, buddy. You know, I think I think this class, you know, with Mark and Hines and Greenfield and McCormick and the Yankees and all those guys are going to be remembered as the Demon Slayers. They have slain so many demons of SDSU football and SDSU football fans going back to last year, beating NDSU not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs. Yes, it was the championship game, not a playoff round. Still beating NDSU in the playoffs. That has been one of the biggest devils on our back. Not dropping a game that, you know, it was always the thing. Hey, SDSU stumbles. And now really, this is the last one outside of going to Montana and winning that's left of slaying any demons is beating UNI on Hobo Day, because UNI's just had our number so badly. And these guys just came out just another day at the office. And I think part of what should also make Jackrabbit fans feel good about how this game went is it didn't look like any major injuries. I don't know. I don't know if you've heard anything about the UNI player that really killed the vibe in the stadium. Like, that was awful.
Yeah, and that was I remember I heard on the radio that I think he was moving around, and he seemed to be doing better. So that's all I've heard about that, is that I think the news was promising on that. So. And it was such a bizarre thing too, because I mean, he basically just got an incidental contact. He ran into Freeman. You know, it wasn't even like he potentially got hit. But I'll say I think that was a kind of a. Well, I mean, like you said, the Demon Slayer thing was right, and it was addressed with both Gronowski. I know Matt Zimmer mentioned it to him, and Gronowski's kind of he's the definitely kind of the head slayer, if you will, because he was the one who. And I think this kind of shows, I hope this shows something to the guys moving forward, that please attack this stuff head on. Don't give us these canned answers. I mean, I know that's what they're kind of trained to say, but he attacked it head on last year. It's like we've asked these guys these questions all the time. Like, oh, you know, why do you guys always, you know, drop this clunker during the regular season? You know, can you complete a full Valley season undefeated? Can you win in the Fargo? Like that, we'd always get, well, we got to take it one game at a time. And Mark always approached it head on. He's like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to take care of this. We know this is the past. We're a new team. He approached it head on. He was not afraid of it. He said, you know, I mean, that was unique. That was different for them. And I think that showed a different level, a different maturity, a different swagger for this team. And whether it actually played a role in any of them actually winning. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend those narratives matter to them, but maybe it did. I don't know. I think it showed that this is a different group, and it certainly maybe gives the fans a different level of confidence. So when we were bringing these things up to him, I brought it up to Jimmy. I mean, before this game, they'd of course lost the 3 straight Hobo Day games to Northern Iowa. They hadn't beaten Northern Iowa on Hobo Day since Jimmy was playing for them in 2009. I didn't really have any doubt that they were going to do what they did yesterday. Maybe I didn't think they were going to do it 41-6 and it'd just be as thorough. But I mean, why would you? It's why I kind of hesitate to make historical comparisons of bad things that have happened, because this program's kind of ascended past that after a year like last year. But you kind of have to, because otherwise, what point is there to have any history? You have to use a little context and things. But yeah, I think it was a big get right game for the defense a little bit. It was mentioned coming in that they had only had 3 sacks on the quarterback all season. In this game, they got 4. And that's a little bit like last year. They didn't really have a ton of pressure going into conference play last year. It picked up during the season. I still think they kind of miss Sanders and Winkleman and are still kind of figuring that out. Also important to remember, though, they didn't have Adam Bach again. He suited up, but didn't play. So I'm guessing he's going to get back in. For them to get 4 sacks without Adam Bach is pretty big. And then you get the 5 turnovers as well. They held Northern Iowa, although, again, Northern Iowa, I didn't really remember Northern Iowa making much of a conscious effort to run the ball, which I'm a little surprised about. They had that play, I think it was their second driver, they got stripped, and they just seemed like they never really tried to run the ball, but they only ran the ball for, as I'm looking at the stats here, 40 yards, which if you remember the David Johnson era, you're like, that just seems impossible. We know Theo Day. He was, I think, All Valley last year. He's probably one of the better pro prospects in the league. He was just harassed. I mean, I think he threw for 224 yards through 2 picks. Didn't look comfortable at all. This was a get-right game for the defense. I think if there were any – and we had questions about the pass defense coming into this game. So I think they just did Savion Williamson. Their linebacking core right now, Dan Fearman mentioned that, their linebacking core, especially when Bach comes back, Bach, Freeman, Savion, good luck with that. I don't know if the defensive line yet is quite to the level it was a year ago, because you're still kind of trying to piece through some things. I think it's going to get there, because I still like a lot of those guys, Caden Williams, Cade Trevere. There's a lot of guys on that line that are good, but that linebacking core is loaded. So, I mean, yeah, I think that was a big get-right game, especially as you're going on a road trip, which, and as good as they are, it could still present some problems as you're going to what has been 2 top 10 teams in Southern Illinois and USD.
Yeah, well, that's what I was, us winning this game by this much in a fashion that it doesn't feel like it was a game that wore the team out or anything. You win by this much, you imagine they're as fresh as you can be coming off of a win is important, because this stretch of games here, I mean, UNI at Southern Illinois, at South Dakota, NDSU at home, Youngstown State. Now, obviously, the NDSU game looks a little less daunting, but the USD game looks more daunting. To have those stacked back to back, you really want to be humming when you go into that game, just from a health aspect. You want everybody as healthy as possible, because you're not going to come out of it healthy. You're going to come out pretty banged up through that stretch, and then you got to go to Youngstown State after that. I mean, that's brutal. Youngstown State's probably going to be fighting for its playoff lives at that point. It's not even close. The toughest conference schedule in the Valley. I don't care what anybody says. In the Valley, I don't need to hear about your Big Sky schedule. I know that it's tough for Montana State. I'm just saying, as a Valley schedule, it does not get more difficult than what SDSU has in front of them. So it was huge to come through this and win like they did. And on the defensive line, it feels a little bit like they're just gelling. They're working on gelling, which feels weird to say about a defensive line compared to an offensive line. But just like it didn't feel like the offensive line was in sync against Montana State. And it feels like now they're really humming and meshed well. It feels like the defensive line is starting to hit their stride a little bit in these last couple of games, getting a couple sacks in each game. I mean, you said 4 in this game. I'm going to have to rewatch this game to give anybody too good of a insight on it, because Hobo Day game, Brendan's watching, but he's cheering more than he's analyzing. So that's why my voice is like this, believe it or not. I mean, there, that you go out and get a little hoarse voice anyways. Spencer says, is the USD the biggest threat left for the Jacks in the Valley? I would say yes. They did escape. They almost let Youngstown State come back on them, which surprises me, because I really didn't think Youngstown State had an offense that was capable of digging out of that sort of hole. But they put up 44 points, or 40 some points in the Uni Dome. They put up a bunch of points against USD. So obviously they've got a better defense than their offense than I thought. The crazy thing is, I think we need to appreciate just how good this SDSU team is, and appreciate that this doesn't happen anywhere. This team hasn't scored less than 40 points. There's only one game they've scored less than 40 points. One, Montana State still scored 20.
That's another.
I mean, otherwise obviously Drake in Western Oregon, but 45, 70, 42, 40, 41. I mean, this offense is incredible, and it's more impressive to me because this isn't a spread slinging it around offense. It's a balanced, you could tell at the beginning of the game, you and I wanted to force us to pass on them a little bit. They were selling out on the run pretty hard. I do remember that. They had some plays on that first drive where they stuffed the run a little bit at the start, and we said, fine. And like, oh, you don't think Mark can beat you? Okay, watch this.
Yeah.
And then so he did,
Yeah, how'd that go for you, Mark Farley?
Well, I mean, that's the killer for these teams, man. You're choosing, you're rocking a hard place there. Do we try to make Mark beat us, or do we let Isaiah Davis stomp our faces into the ground?
Yeah,
it's gonna be so hard to make this team one-dimensional. I know Montana State fans feel really good.
And they should. They should
going into the next game. Absolutely should. There's a lot of people, I've had chats with Brian Thompson, buddy of mine who's an NDSU fan and stuff. He's like, oh, I think Montana State's going to give you all sorts of problems. I get it, but also this offense is not the same offense. And I'm not saying that Montana State's defense didn't make them look the way they did in that game or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying this line they were not synced up. You could see it in the Western Oregon game. We weren't getting the same rushing yards. In the Western Oregon game, they didn't look as dominant as they do now. So that's against a D2 school. So yeah, it's for me, I don't know how the USD game should make us nervous, but you got to have a lot of faith in these guys.
Well, I do want to get to Spencer's question here because I do want to talk more about that USD game. But yeah, to put a bow on SDSU, UNI, yeah, I agree with everything you pretty much said. And I mean, look, to your point about that Montana State game in the early season, look, if I'd have said USD is going to be they're trending to a top 5 team right now. Let's just be honest, especially with everything else that just happened it's trending that's going to be a top 5 game. I'm guessing they're probably going to be maybe 5th, 4th at this point when they play SDSU. He said that if I'd have said that after they squeaked by after the first half of their games against Lamar and St. Thomas, I would have been committed. I think again, you have to bear in mind non-conference is kind of a bit of a lie. It's not always. Look, NDSU thought Cam Miller was the most accurate quarterback of all time, and they thought they had this offense that had solved a lot of issues, and then they get in conference, and all of a sudden you get exposed a little bit because you're playing teams that know you. Conference is where you really see what a team is when you're playing people, when you're playing teams that you know you inside and out. So, I hope people maybe start take these non-conference games after a year like this with a little more perspective. But yeah, with the SDSU game
about USD and being trending as a top 5 team. It's not that I don't believe in their team, but they're where they are right now because they beat NDSU when NDSU was considered to be NDSU. And now, and I like when I do my poll for the FCS Fans Nation, I'm not going to drop them because of that. But it is something to keep in mind. are they? And I think some of it for me mentally is just because they came out of nowhere. But are they really a top 5 team when, yeah, you beat NDSU and you've got a top 5 win on your resume, but you also squeaked by Youngstown State?
I guess my thing at this point is I mean, aside from Montana State and SDSU, who really is a top 5?
Right.
I mean, like
Yeah.
everybody is getting picked off. We saw what happened to Idaho. We've seen what I mean. Everybody at this point is it's really the only 2 teams you can really make that case for right now that you think for sure are at that level are Montana State and SDSU at this point. So yeah, at this point where USD is, I think they're deserving of working their way up, and they'll get their chance to prove it. But yeah, I do think what happened. Yeah, you have to wonder now about the quality of. I still think you go into the Fargo Dome and you beat the Bison. That still has to count for something. But yeah, it definitely. Yeah, I mean, it definitely knocks you down. It definitely knocks some of the Bison mystique down a peg when you saw what just happened. But yeah, right now the whole FCS is kind of in a very fluid state. But yeah, to wrap up a little bit on that on the SDSU game. Also, speaking of get right, a little shout out I think to Hunter Dustman, who had that rough week over at. He had the rough game at Northern or Illinois State. Didn't have much punting to do yesterday, to be honest, but he did have a 46-yarder, hit a couple of nice long field goals. Thought he had a pretty good game. The one thing I really liked, we mentioned Gronowski, very accurate game, 21-26, 291, 3 touchdowns, had 30 yards rushing and the 1-yard touchdown, but they really spread the ball around nicely. They had 8 different guys catch a football. Just really, I mean, that was incredible. And it wasn't, and there really wasn't one guy who, I mean, at max, any one guy had was 4 catches. You had Hines, Wilde, Jaden Yonke had 4 catches. Jackson, Amar, Jackson had 3. And I mean, it just really spread the ball around nicely. So that was encouraging to see. And just, yeah, I mean, just so many weapons. And it's getting, I think, even harder now for people to try and box this offense in. But not much more you can really say about what was just a thorough effort, maybe the most thorough game for SDSU, and they're starting to peak, I think, at the right time. As for USD, you want to talk about accuracy too. This number is going to sound very familiar, and I think this is a big difference why USD is where they are and why you can make a case for them as a top 5, top 10 team. See if this number sounds familiar. Aiden Bauman, 24 of 29, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, obviously I think their schedule was a big part of the reason that they've been able to get into this groove. Last year's schedule was suicidal. Some of that was out of their control. I don't know how they ended up getting SDSU and NDSU right off the jump. That Montana game was pre-scheduled years ago, unfortunately, and then they had Kansas State, who just happened to win the Big 12. So they got a easier lead into the season. And we know there was other issues going on outside that we can't really get into that were extracurricular up there. But it's just Aiden Bauman's a different cat. That's a different leader under center. They, like you said, it was surprising they gave up that big lead. I think that does speak to Youngstown. Youngstown's a good team. They're maybe not at the they're not quite at the level of old Youngstown, who used to be a power in the conference. But when they needed that drive, Bauman led them downfield in the final minute, got them into field goal range, hit a great pass, hit a 22-yard pass where he just put one right on the money to get him in field goal range. He is a different cat, and he is going to be a problem for SDSU. Because I said this yesterday, I'm like, hey, I know Theo Day was all conference. I hear a lot of stuff like, oh, he could be a pro. For me, Mark Gronowski is the number 1 quarterback in this conference. He wins. He may not have the measurables and all that stuff, but he's number 1. Bauman's pretty quickly up there to number 2. And, I know some Coyote fans are already chirping. He's like, well, Bauman's got to prove it to me now against Gronowski, and he's got to prove it in the playoffs. That's going to be his chance, and he's going to be a tougher challenge for SDSU because in a few games I've already seen more poise out of him. Day got more. I'll be curious to see how he handles SDSU because Day got more rattled when the pressure was on. I don't think Bauman is going to make. I mean, we'll see. I don't know. and USD's offensive line has been playing much better than it did earlier in the season. And somebody's saying, yeah, Bauman can't move. He doesn't move like Mark. I think he might have the better arm. I do think he might have the better arm than Mark. He doesn't run as well, but he does move decently in the pocket. He isn't going to be as much of a statue, but he does have good poise. He's not. I don't think he's going to make as many mistakes as what I saw from Day yesterday and get rattled. I think he'll stand in. I think he'll throw a ball away if he needs to. I think he's going to be he'll be the best challenge SDSU faces at quarterback. Although I think Nick Baker this coming week for Southern Illinois could be. You just never know what you're going to get from Nick, quite frankly. I think you're still on mute there. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Nick Baker. The Southern Illinois. I don't know what to make of those guys. They're just all over. It doesn't make any sense. USD. I mean, you can't argue with the results, man. I mean, they're 5-1. Like you said, the schedule's a huge deal. They're getting to go to Indiana State, so they should be rested up before this game. SDSU playing at Southern Illinois. Well, I fully expect the full Monty from Southern Illinois. I do expect them to be very prepared for this game. How is that gonna work for them? I don't know. It's another road test. SDSU passed the last one with flying colors. They're pretty locked in. I wouldn't like the Salukis' chances if I was one of their fans, but it's one of those things. You're going to get everybody's best shot, and if you don't come with your full firepower into that game, you can get clipped, and then now you got a problem, because are you going to get a top 2 seed? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing you do have to watch for is it's weird because I feel like we're not really talking about the next week's games because we're all wanting to look ahead to what could be coming on the horizon in 2 weeks in Vermilion. Look, even USD, I wouldn't look. You can't overlook Indiana State because I've seen them. I remember last year they played North Dakota State tough. They've had some games this year where they played UNI tough, I think a week ago. Even though they're 0-6, you get caught looking ahead, stuff can happen. Obviously, I don't think that'll happen to SDSU because you have to respect Southern Illinois. They're 5-1. I think the Jackrabbits, they're guys who remember what happened a few years ago when State blew the 20-point lead at home. I mean, that alone probably has the Jacks pretty eager to see this team. They'll never admit it, but I'm sure there's some guys who want to enact a little payback for that because they didn't get a chance to play them a year ago. So by the way, Southern Illinois, they had I think we made light of this last week. Somebody made light of it on Twitter that I think every team SDSU's playing from here on out gets either Murray or Indiana State. And Southern Illinois didn't really have any problem yesterday. They beat down Murray State 27-6. Baker, I just can't figure him out. He even in this game, he didn't have a great line score. 14-23, 137. Good day from their running back, Justin Long. 14 carries, 128, 1 touchdown. I don't know if they really have I think the one thing that was a big difference in the last couple of years that they played when they played in the playoffs and then of course in that fall season, they had that great wide receiver. His name slips my mind. I don't think they necessarily have that big wide. I don't think they have those wide receiver targets they had that gave SDSU so much problems. But they've obviously had some big offensive games and their defense has been all right at times. And they do have an FBS win to their credit. They beat, I believe it was Northern Illinois, but it's been a hot and cold team, and it's in Carbondale, which is a somewhat tough road trip to take. So we'll see, but it's hard to imagine SDSU losing this game. But I don't picture Jimmy Rogers and the boys overlooking and getting overlooking anyone at this point.
I mean, really, at this point, I would consider this a trap game because, like you said, those are the games before. You got a big rivalry game coming up afterwards. It's going to be a top 10 matchup, and it's a good team that had a fluky loss against Youngstown, and now you're going to be waiting for, it's hard for you to see us losing it. Well, that smells like. Now I'm nervous. Thanks, you made me nervous today. I wasn't. But now I'm nervous, so I'm glad I got that feeling back.
I mean, this schedule should make anyone nervous, but I mean, look, I would still be a little nervous about NDSU just because the Bison are as bad as they looked yesterday. I mean, they've now got even more reason to make SDSU their SDSU. How's this for reversal? Now SDSU is their Super Bowl, essentially. Okay. I mean, but I mean, just the way the only game that I would really feel really nervous about is probably USD at this point, and that's. I mean, every game they have played in the Division I era in Vermilion has been close. And it doesn't matter how good the Coyotes have been or how good the Jackrabbits have been. They've all been close. They've all come down to the fourth quarter. It took...
Well, in USD anyways.
Yeah, I mean, this was in Vermilion. I'm talking about the games and even a lot of the games in Brookings have, surprisingly. I mean, there have been a couple blowouts, but I remember the Strebler game, and I think in one of those years, it was a Strebler game that came down in the fourth quarter. But everyone in Vermilion, oddly enough, I remember the first couple of games in Vermilion, it took them needing pick sixes in those first couple of Vermilion games to put those games away. Taron Christian's worst game, one of his worst games as a Jackrabbit, I think as a true freshman, he got benched, and Zach Lujan had to come in and save them from losing, to USD. I think that was the year USD beat NDSU, like Joe Glenn's final year. Again, with it's just, and then of course we're not even speaking about what happened with the miracle in 2021. That's always been a tough game, and this is a USD team that's got belief. I think the Coyotes are. I mean, look, the Coyotes are. What I think is different about the Coyotes is I think they're building this team the right way. Their lines are looking better. Their offensive line is playing better. I thought it was a mess at the beginning of the season. They've solved some things. They're running the football better. Not as good yesterday. They ran for 106, but they didn't give up any sacks. Bauman was on his feet the whole game. They're getting a lot of offensive yards. Defensively, they're getting some sacks. They're getting the pressure to the quarterback. Now, full confession, I did not see the whole game. I don't know exactly what was going on during that comeback for Youngstown. I mean, I do think the Penguins have some players. They hit some really big plays. I know they hit a 66-yard touchdown right away to get back in it. I've seen the Coyotes have had some lulls on offense where it doesn't quite work, and I think that's kind of what happened. And it looks like they had a turnover and some drives. So, that is the thing that could maybe bite, I think, USD when they play SDSU is if the Coyotes do have a couple of series where they go 3 and out or it's not working, SDSU could take advantage of that, build a 2-score lead, put it away. That's where I could see that game potentially spiraling out for them because, you can get away with that against Youngstown. I don't know if you get away with that against SDSU. And clearly the Jackrabbits are going to be a different animal for them defensively than what they faced. Obviously, I think they've got confidence after beating NDSU, but we're seeing that NDSU is not what NDSU has been. So, and yeah, somebody's mentioned that Dan Furman there's a guy that reminds him of Caleb Sanders. I'm guessing he's thinking of I can't remember the guy's name now either, but he won national play. Their defensive line is looking really good. Like I said, I think USD's building it right down there. They're starting to, this is what I've been harping on them for years to do. It's like you need to look up north at what's happening and how they're building that team. It's in the trenches. I don't think obviously they're not quite at SDSU's level yet. It's building. And I think they're starting. That's why I'm starting to think, it's not quite there yet, but I think there's some legitimate parts of this that it's, that's the one I would be nervous about at this point. And, I'm not even Youngstown could still be difficult. That's not an easy trip in November to the Ice Castle. But, this team at this point for SDSU, when you've won a national title, how nervous do you get when you have the whole team back and they've broken every barrier in team history? I mean, I'm sure that's something. Gronowski's never played in the Dakota Dome. Davis has never played in the Dakota Dome. They were eager to play.
One thing we know about Isaiah Davis. He loves to put on a show when he's never played someone or played somewhere. Yeah. That is, he takes it personally. He took that UND game personally just because he hadn't played it, which is crazy.
Well, and I think Gronowski, and they'll look at this like as another one of those challenges and barriers that, we're told we can't, like the Hobo Day thing or the clunkers. Look at this is like, oh, we can't, well, we always play a close game in Vermilion. I'm sure that'll be a more incentive to them to want to go out there and try and blow them out. Now, will that happen? I don't know. But
I think the worst thing for USD this year is the Hail Mary that happened. That's going to be the worst thing. That's going to go against them more than anything because they're going to see it all week. Because last time you were here, look what happened, and they're going to have that. The promos are all going to have it, and that I don't know if that's what you want if you're USD.
And it's so fascinating to me too because the guys who hooked up in that are gone. Like they left almost. The receiver who caught it, whose name escapes me, he left almost immediately. Like he transferred in the spring of that year. Carson Camp, we know he never, like that was his high point. Like he almost immediately after that lost his mojo at that school. I don't blame them for having, that happens. And, if that happens, if SDSU does that in a game against NDSU, I don't blame them. I mean, that's going to be on the stadium wall for all time. That absolutely should be a moment that's immortalized in any school. I mean, hell, it happened to my school last night. It's going to be immortalized for all time. But yeah, it's bizarre that literally the two guys who did it are gone within not even barely a year of it happening. So I mean, it's going to be shown, and they're going to be asked about it. I kind of want to pick Jimmy's brain, although I'm guessing he won't be too eager to talk about it. But I just want to pick their brain about why guys are still batting footballs up in the air at this point, because we're still seeing it in the pros. I mean, there was that Denver-Washington game earlier this year. It happened in the pros where it got batted up in the Denver-Washington game for a touchdown. And, of course, last night I watched the CSU game. It got batted down and a guy still caught for a touchdown. So I don't know. It's funny that we've heard all these years, knock it down, and people don't do it. You'd think it. I'm just curious from Jimmy's standpoint, having played defensive back at a very high level and coached it. What are you thinking when that ball's in the? What do you coached, and what are you thinking when you actually see it coming to you? I played defensive line and not at a very high level either, but I'm just curious what they think, because it's got to be. Even this year when Montana State was in, they almost got beat by a much shorter pass like that. So, yeah, we'll see it again. But again, they can't get caught looking too far ahead. They've still got to both of them have to take care of business next week. And I saw a question earlier up here. Somebody asked it, what are the chances of game day coming to Vermilion? I still think they're low. There's always a chance. There's nothing new under the sun. It was an SDSU fan who asked it. So, I guess it's worth looking at, because, I guess I need to take a look now at what the slate is for that week. Again, what it's always going to depend on for the FCS, number one, is how good are the games in FBS that week. If there's I don't care who's playing in the FCS. If there's a big time FBS game that week, it's gonna get the attention of game day. So that'll be the number one thing, and that's the week of October 28th. I'm just looking right now at what the top 25 looks like, and the one thing I will say that would bode decently for them potentially is there is not a really big FBS game that I'm seeing right now on the schedule. Like it's a pretty barren Tennessee and Kentucky. That's not really moving the needle. Duke and Louisville, I doubt it. USC just lost. Texas isn't. Oregon, Utah would have been, but now Oregon's lost. So they're, Oklahoma, Kansas, no. So, if Game Day really wants to do something outside of the box, they could. I've just said this a couple of times. I don't. Again, USD doesn't have the same. When they came to SDSU in 2019, I think a couple things were in play. Number one, we have to be honest. The fact NDSU was coming did help. They had a previous relationship with the Bison. They'd been to Fargo, I think, twice at that point. The Bison had that. They were in the middle of their run. They had Trey Lance at the time, the win streak. And SDSU had built a reputation. They were the last team to beat the Bison at that point. They were 6-1 too at the time, but SDSU had been building a reputation. USD's still pretty new. To say they're new on the scene right now is an understatement. They've had some decent teams, and I still think last year was a bit of an aberration in terms of what happened. But in terms of being a national contender, USD has not really been there yet. So, I mean, is it certainly the best matchup in FCS in a week? Like, if you had an FCS only game day, sure. But, you know, and again, I just think from a ratings standpoint, do you really want to do an all South Dakota show? I don't know. I would love it if they did it. I would love it. That would be awesome. I'm all for it. But I don't think so. I'd love to be wrong, but I just don't think so.
I think if they're doing it, you're banking on SDSU fans coming and giving you the crowd you need. I'm like, sorry, USD, and obviously SDSU has had our attendance problems, right? And things like that. And now we're selling it out. And a lot of us act like we've been doing it for decades. Like, okay, but that dome is only 9,000 seats.
I know.
You can't sell out 9,000. You can't fill 9,000 seats. Like, come on. Like, and so you can't tell me they look at that and go, their fan base is going to show up like they mean it.
Well, I mean, it's not so much. The one thing is obviously ESPN doesn't do the game. That's I mean, now that might change when they start doing the TV contract now, because they're obviously in the years ahead, they're going to start to tell us.
They still want the crowd there, though, right? I mean, there's got to be some consideration of, are we going to have enough people show up to not make this look bad?
They'll still, but we know. I mean, look. I mean, I remember when USD had their Sweet 16 women's team a few years ago. They sent several thousand people down to Wichita. Coyote fans do show up when there is a big event, and we know they show up to play SDSU. I mean, look, and there were some people who criticized their attendance yesterday too. I've seen that from even some Coyote fans. If they're getting college game day, they're gonna. And I don't know where you would put it in Vermilion. Maybe you would put something downtown. That's the other thing too. I don't know where you stage it. I don't know if you stage
can't honestly want that stadium in the background. I think it's not pretty from the outside. If we're being honest, it's not.
No. I think maybe you try something downtown. I mean, I don't know. Maybe their campus, they have the bell tower set up. Because I remember the Fargo setup. I mean, it's the same thing with the Fargo Dome, though. When you were telling me when they were doing it, like would you have ever done one in the Fargo Dome?
No.
Fargo Dome's the Fargo Dome's a glorified airplane hangar. So when they had the Fargo Dome set up, that was a really nice setup. It was in downtown Fargo. Now, obviously, Vermilion's a lot smaller. But, USC's got that set up. I mean, you got the bell tower out there. Yeah, the Char Bar. I don't know. I mean, I don't really think this is going to happen. But it would. But, again, you just never know. No one thought it was going to happen in Brookings, and it did. It just – you just never know. And if there is an outside-the-box time to do it, this would be a decent week, because – there really is not a primetime FBS game unless something develops over the next week. It could, but I do think USD. I don't think I will say something that disappointed me 2 years ago, and I called them out at the time for this. When you had the SDSU thing, I remember, of course, Game Day is famous for all the flags we see at the thing. Mm-hmm. And I remember, of course, there were SDSU. I mean, in fact, that stop was obviously so well received and so well done that I'm still seeing it in promos for Game Day when they run their commercials now. Of course, I had my fat head was on a fat head, and it showed up in that, and it's still in there. But I saw flags from Augustana. I saw flags from Sioux Falls. I saw a Dakota Wesleyan flag. I think Mary. I think Bemidji might have had one. Mary. I'm like, all these flags. Either way, some fans came up, took time to fly their flag, and there was not one USD flag, and that disappointed me. And I heard Coyote fans, they gave me all kinds of excuses, and at this time, obviously, they were kind of beaten down. Ironically, this would be a few weeks later, they would go on to beat SDSU for the first time in the D1 era. But I was just disappointed by that. I'm like, not one of you came up here. I mean, this is maybe the only time South Dakota will ever be on this stage as a state, just as a whole, South Dakota will have this kind of a platform. Not one of you comes up to wave a flag for your school and get that on national TV. And I heard all kinds of excuses like, well, I don't want to spend money in Brookings. And some of those, I get that, but just show your spirit. I know I know you're going to get jeered. I know you're going to get crap. But I mean, look at the game day that was in Boulder this past year, a few weeks ago. There were still a decent amount of CSU. I can only imagine how many those CSU people that showed up flying flags were getting crap. God, they probably got. I wouldn't have had the guts to go do that, but they showed up and they got on. And like the CSU administration, we knew that show was all about Coach Prime and Boulder. They still showed up, and you know what? It's still exposure for your school. It still puts you on. You still at least show your pride, and that disappointed me in 19 that not one USD fan, put a flag up for them. So, I think eventually, I mean, look, I think they will show up if they get their stop, if they get their chance. But yeah, like I said, that was something that left a mark with me. It's like, man, you see Augie comes up here, you see USF, you see D2 and NAIA schools are coming here to fly a flag, and you don't. That was not that left an impression. But like I said, there are good Coyote fans, just like there are good Bison fans. We know them, and I saw the way they turned out in Wichita a few years ago when they nearly won at the Sweet 16. I think you would see a big showing there would be a lot of SDSU fans too. There would be a lot of red. There would be a lot of blue. I think you'd probably I think you would have that big bell tower thing in the background probably, and I think it'd be a good time regardless. I think it would be a good time, but do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. But you know what? Why not? There is no way any of us thought that SDSU USD was going to be a top 5 matchup at the start of the season. Why not get a college game day?
Well, I can tell you why not from an SDSU side.
I know you guys don't want it.
I know why not.
I know you don't want it.
I'm going to be really honest. They don't deserve it. They've done nothing to earn it. They don't have any right to be able to hang their hat on that after how long of a road it was for SDSU to get to a level where that was a consideration. And then you get one win against NDSU. One, and then you get college game day. To be honest, that would bother me.
Well, I would say this though. Look on the bright side. When you got college game day, you lost NDSU at home. They spoiled the party. I mean, obviously you still have the memory, but
don't get me started on that game.
NDSU spoiled the party. I mean, you would still have the chance to spoil
NDSU
USD.
Got lucky. NDSU should not have won that game.
Oh, I know. I mean, I think if Jabore doesn't get hurt on the first play or two, second, yeah. I'm gonna answer a text here real quick, but yeah, like I said, you still got a chance to spoil their thing. But I mean, look, I get it, and I said this in a tweet as well last night. I don't expect fan bases to cheer for each other or root for each other. But at the very least, look, I mean. Oh, hold on, I'm having a little internet trouble. You still see me?
Froze. I can hear you, but you're froze.
Oh, my son.
Ron brings up flag burning time. That happened to my flag last time I went down there. It got burned on the USD Barstool's Instagram page.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a little trouble there real quick? Sorry. I don't know if my internet blinked out.
You're good.
I said this on Twitter as I'm guessing we're wrapping up here because obviously we gotta get it. It's been a pretty good hour here. Plus, I mean, we had a lot to talk about. But
my wife wants me to meet her for lunch. So
yeah. Well, I said this last night on Twitter, and I'll say it again. Like I said, I don't expect the fan bases to root for each other, but obviously, you just look at how far this state has come along. I mean, you got clearly the number one best Division I FCS team right now in SDSU. You've got an ascending, at least we think, top 5, top 10 team in USD. I mentioned that we have Division I college hockey in this state, in Augustana right now, which I think is going to grow. there's more to come. I mean, this state, you don't have to cheer for it, but man, you have to really appreciate how far along this state has come in college athletics in even a decade. But compared to where it was, and I know people still have love for what happened in the Division II era and in those bygone years, but the state is so much farther along than where it was in the D2 era competitively as a brand. It's grown its image nationally. That, I mean, look, if College Game Day came here a second time just for a South Dakota and South Dakota State thing, yeah, I realize you have a valid point as a Jackrabbit fan, but that would be those are the kind of things no one would have ever dreamed of. No one would ever dream of them ever coming here. And like I said, I think there are even bigger things that could be coming down the road for this state. I mean, so like I said, you don't have to cheer for your rivals. You don't have to hope for success. But man, you really have to appreciate it. And as SDSU, you guys started it. I mean, if they didn't make the Division I leap, none of this would be happening. It's the rise, the rising tide floats all boats. I mean, what's happening in this state is special right now. And I hope people can appreciate that. And even if, God, I would love to see an SDSU USD national title game. I mean, full disclosure, people are like, oh, you're a homer for SDSU or you hate USD. It's like, best thing that could happen for me would be if they both made the national title game. I get to sit back and whoever wins, wins, whoever loses, loses. But this is like Bradley said, remember when there was no, even the D2, it's even raised the level of the D2 and the NAIA schools to have the D1 teams at this level. We're in a golden era for college athletics. It's raised the level of the high school competition. Look at what Sanford has done in some of the athletic, in terms of the facilities we now have in Sioux Falls for high school athletics. I mean, this is a golden era for college athletics in this state, and I don't really see it ending anytime soon. It's only getting better. So, if College Game Day comes to Vermilion, I will be shocked, but it would be, if it's for a South Dakota State game, are you kidding me? That would be insane. And full disclosure, I don't think it's going to happen, but if we're talking about that this time we won't be talking about this time next week because we'll have our post-game show at the normal time. But if we're talking about that this time next week,
we'll see. We'll probably know this time next week. So
yeah, it was about this time. When the Game Day announcement came in 2019, it was about this time. It came down. It was about I remember it was noon. I remember I was shooting something at the Sanford Pentagon, and my phone blew up with that video announcement they made, and I was floored. But to be fair, they both got to take care of business next week. SDSU goes to Southern Illinois, and USD will be at Indiana State, and we'll see if they take care of business. We are going to have some fun time here in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I think we can probably wrap her up. So,
yep. Thanks for joining us on a late post-game show. Yes. Hope you all enjoyed your Hobo Day and your Saturday night, and we will talk to you again next Saturday at 11 o'clock p.m. normal time after the games. Have a great week, everyone.
See ya.